The mysterious arrival. It was a warm summer afternoon in the 12th century, the kind of day when the wheat fields shimmered like gold under the sun, and the bells of the small English village of Woolpit rang softly in the distance. Farmers worked in the fields, children ran between the cottages, and women carried baskets of bread. Life in Woolpit was ordinary, steady, and predictable, until the day everything changed. On that afternoon, a group of harvesters were working near the edges of the village, close to the deep wolf pits that gave Woolpit its name. These pits, dug to trap wolves, were feared by the children but respected by the adults as a necessary danger. As the farmers bent low to gather their wheat, one of them suddenly froze. His eyes widened, and he dropped his sickle. Something strange was moving near the pits. At first, they thought it might be animals, but then the figures stepped into the light. Two children, a boy and a girl, stood at the edge of the pit. They looked human, but at the same time, utterly alien. The skin glowed with a faint green hue, like fresh spring leaves. Their clothes were made of a material no villager recognized, rough, woven strangely, with colors that shimmered and faded under the sunlight. The children were whispering to each other in a language no one had ever heard before. The words rose and fell like music, full of tones that carried no meaning to the ears of Woolpit's people. Their eyes darted nervously, wide with fear, as though they had stumbled into a world they did not understand. The harvesters gathered around cautiously. "Who are they?" one of the men whispered. "Are they spirits? Elves? The devil's work?" The villagers, frightened but curious, brought the children into the heart of Woolpit. As they walked, people emerged from their cottages, gasping at the sight. Mothers pulled their children closer, while elders muttered prayers under their breath. But there was also wonder in their eyes, for never had they seen anything like this before. When the children were given bread, they refused to eat. When offered meat, they turned away in disgust. They whispered to each other again in their strange tongue, their voices trembling. Finally, when someone brought fresh beans, still in their pods, the children's eyes lit up. They eagerly tore the pods open, chewing the beans raw. It was the first time the villagers saw them smile. The villagers noticed that the boy was weaker than the girl, his face pale beneath the green tint. The girl, though frightened, showed more strength and curiosity, clutching her brother's hand tightly. She would not let him go. That night, the villagers placed them in a small cottage under the care of a local nobleman. The fire burned warmly, but the children huddled together in the corner, whispering and crying in their strange language. No one could comfort them. To the villagers, they seemed like lost souls, caught between two worlds. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the children began to adapt. They learned a few words of English, enough to ask for food and water. The villagers marveled at their intelligence. But still, the green skin remained, their strange origins a mystery. Whispers spread through Woolpit. Some said the children had wandered from another land hidden beneath the earth. Others claimed they had come from the stars. A few feared they were cursed, sent as a warning from God. But for most, they were simply children, innocent and lost, in need of care. The boy, however, grew weaker. He often refused to eat, and when he did, he ate only beans. His sister tried to encourage him, but his eyes grew dimmer each day. The villagers feared he would not survive the harsh English winters. One evening, as the sun set behind the wheat fields and painted the sky crimson, the girl stood by the cottage window. She gazed at the horizon, clutching a bean pod in her hand, and whispered to her brother in their strange tongue. Her voice was filled with longing, sorrow, and a kind of homesickness no one could understand. The people of Woolpit, though they could not comprehend her words, felt her pain deeply. For the first time, they realized these were not spirits or creatures, but children torn from the home they loved, children who carried with them a secret that the world might never uncover. And thus began the legend of the Green Children of Woolpit, a story that would be told and retold for centuries, carrying with it the mystery of who they were, and where they had come from. Shadows of Loss. The days grew shorter, and autumn's chill began to creep over Woolpit. Smoke curled from the thatched cottages as villagers prepared for the long winter. But inside the small house where the Green children lived, warmth could not chase away the shadow that had fallen upon them. The boy, who once clung to his sister's hand with desperate strength, now grew weaker by the day. His green-tinted face had lost its faint glow, fading into a dull, ashen color. The villagers tried everything. They brought him beans freshly picked, soups, even sweet fruits from the market, but he would only nibble at the pods. His appetite waned, and so too did his life. The girl never left his side. She fed him carefully, whispering words of comfort in their strange language. When he was too weak to eat, she held his hand and sang softly to him, melodies no one in Woolpit understood, but that carried a haunting beauty, echoing with sorrow. Some villagers who heard her wept without knowing why. Despite their efforts, the boy's decline was inevitable. One evening, as a storm rattled the village and rain pounded against the roof, the boy's breathing grew shallow. His sister lay beside him, her small hand resting against his chest, tears streaming silently down her green cheeks. The villagers gathered outside the cottage, heads bowed, candles flickering in the night. They could not speak his language, but they felt the weight of his suffering as though it were their own child. At dawn, the boy was gone. The girl's cry echoed through Woolpit that morning, heartbreaking, raw, and filled with despair. She clutched his lifeless body, refusing to let go until the villagers gently took him from her arms. The villagers buried him at the edge of the churchyard, though whispers spread that perhaps he should have been buried outside consecrated ground. Still, compassion outweighed fear, and a small wooden cross was placed at his resting place. For days, the girl would sit by his grave, her strange green skin pale under the autumn sun. She said nothing, only whispered to the earth as though speaking to him still. Though the villagers could not understand her words, they knew what they meant: love, sorrow, and the longing of a sister for the only family she had. But life in Woolpit went on. Slowly, the girl began to adapt. Under the care of the nobleman who had taken her in, she learned English. Her voice was soft, accented with a melody that made even simple words sound strange and enchanting. The villagers, once fearful of her green skin, began to see her as one of their own. She smiled now and then, though her eyes carried the shadow of loss. Her diet changed as well. She began to eat bread, fruits, and meat, no longer relying only on beans. And as she grew, something miraculous happened: her skin lost its green tint. The pale color of the English people replaced the otherworldly shade, until she looked almost entirely like any other child in Woolpit. Yet still, she was different. Her mannerisms, her stories, her dreams, all hinted at a world beyond Woolpit. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, the nobleman asked her gently, "Where did you come from, child?" The girl's eyes glistened with memory. At first, she hesitated, as though afraid no one would believe her. But slowly, she began to speak. She told of a land where the sun never shone, where twilight lingered endlessly, casting everything in shades of dusk. The people there lived much as humans did, but they were different, like her and her brother. The skin carried the same green hue, and their food was unlike anything in Woolpit. She explained that she and her brother had been tending their father's animals when they heard the sound of bells, bells unlike any they had heard before. Following the sound, they wandered into a dark cavern. Inside, they walked for what felt like hours. And when they finally emerged, they found themselves blinded by the sunlight of a world they did not know. The villagers listened in silence, hearts heavy with wonder and unease. Some believed she spoke of an underground land, hidden beneath the earth. Others whispered of fairies, of portals between worlds. And a few crossed themselves in fear, thinking of demons and enchantments. But the girl spoke with such honesty, her grief for her brother so genuine, that few doubted her. She was not a demon, nor a spirit. She was a lost child of a world no one could explain. Years passed. The girl grew into a young woman, her beauty carrying an unearthly grace. She lived among the villages, but she never truly belonged. She often sat alone by the fields, staring at the horizon as though waiting for something, or someone, that never came. The villagers would sometimes find her standing by her brother's grave at night, her face lifted to the stars, whispering softly in the strange language she had never forgotten. Though her skin was no longer green, her heart remained bound to the world she had lost. Answer: the story of the Green Children deepened, no longer just a tale of strange arrivals, but of love, loss, and the eternal question of where we come from, and where we truly belong. Whispers of a Strange Woman. As the seasons turned and the years passed, the strange green girl of Woolpit grew into a young woman. Though her skin had faded to the pale shade of the villages, people never forgot the mystery of her arrival. To many, she was no longer the green child, but rather the stranger who became one of us. She lived under the protection of the nobleman who had first sheltered her, and he treated her with kindness. Yet even in comfort, she carried within her the loneliness of someone who did not truly belong. Despite this, she was strong, sharper and quicker than most. She learned the English tongue well, her accent never quite disappearing, and she often startled villagers with words that seemed wiser, deeper than her years. Some said she carried the knowledge of two worlds, the one below, and the one above. In time, she began working in the household of another noble family, her beauty and strange history making her a subject of both fascination and caution. It was here that she met a man. Some stories say he was a knight, others say a servant of noble birth. Whoever he was, he treated her not with suspicion, but with gentleness. For the first time since her brother's death, she allowed herself to feel joy. The two grew close, their bond quiet but undeniable. Whispers of their affection spread through Woolpit, and soon, she was married. Yet marriage did not erase her strangeness. Many villagers recalled how she spoke little of love, and more often of dreams where she still heard the bells that had led her and her brother into the cave long ago. Sometimes she woke at night, trembling, murmuring in her forgotten tongue. Her husband once asked her, "Do you still long for that place? That land you came from?" She looked at him, her eyes distant. "It is a land of shadows," she whispered, "but it is also home. Here, the sun warms me, yet it burns. There, we lived in twilight, where the world was dim, but safe. My brother waits for me there." Though she bore a child and lived among her people, she never truly shed the aura of mystery. Some said she carried sorrow in her bones, as if part of her always walked between two worlds. But there were darker whispers too. Some villagers claimed that her blood carried enchantment, that her child bore strange features, a gaze too piercing, a spirit too restless. Others whispered that she had moments of cruelty, of sharp temper, as if the other world still flowed in her veins. A few even avoided her, crossing themselves when she passed, afraid that her presence was a reminder of forces beyond God's creation. The young woman, however, seemed unaware, or perhaps uncaring, of these whispers. She worked, she raised her child, and she lived. But every so often, she was seen at the edge of the woods, staring into the darkness of the trees, her lips moving in her strange language as though calling out to someone who never answered. And always, she visited her brother's grave. There, she left flowers in the spring, autumn leaves in the fall, and sometimes, she sat for hours without moving, her hand pressed to the earth. Many claimed they heard her singing softly, that same unearthly lullaby she had once used to comfort him. By now, the girl was no longer just a mystery, she was a legend. Children whispered about her in games, calling her the fairy woman of Woolpit. Some feared her, some admired her, but none could deny that she was unlike anyone else they had ever known. As she aged, her beauty faded, but her presence only deepened. There was something in her gaze, a quiet knowledge, an unseen sorrow, that made people fall silent in her company. And though her story had spread far and wide, attracting travelers who came to Woolpit just to hear the tale, she herself never sought attention. She only wanted to live. Yet, destiny had already marked her. She could never escape the story she carried within her, the tale of the green children who came from the shadows, and of the sister who remained behind. The woman who walked between worlds. Years passed, and the once strange girl of Woolpit grew older. Her skin, once an unearthly green, had long ago faded into the pale tone of those around her. Yet no matter how human she appeared, the villagers never forgot what she truly was, a child who had stepped out of the earth itself. Her life was not without hardship. Though she had married and borne a child, whispers never ceased. Some villagers feared she was a witch, others thought she was blessed, a woman touched by God or perhaps cursed by something older. Whenever misfortune struck Woolpit, a bad harvest, a sickness in the cattle, there were those who cast suspicious eyes upon her. And yet, there were also those who sought her out. Mothers brought their sick children to her, claiming she carried knowledge of healing herbs unknown to others. Travelers asked for her blessing before long journeys. Even noblemen listened when she spoke, sensing a wisdom that could not be explained. But her own heart was never at peace. At night, she still dreamed of the cavern where she and her brother had stumbled into the world above. She still heard the bells, echoing in her mind like a call that would never fade. In those dreams, her brother often appeared, not as the thin, starving boy who had died so long ago, but as he had been in their home, strong, smiling, alive. He never spoke, but his eyes seemed to plead with her, "Come back." As her child grew, she became quieter, retreating often into the woods. Villagers sometimes followed her, watching from a distance as she stood among the trees, her face lifted toward the wind, whispering words in her old tongue. A few swore they saw strange lights flickering near her, or shadows that moved when they should not. In her final years, she grew weary, her once bright eyes dimming. She confessed to her husband one night that she knew her time was nearing. "I was never meant to stay here," she said softly. "This land was kind to me, but it was never mine. My brother waits, my people wait, and soon, I must return." Not long after, she fell ill. The villagers said it was a wasting sickness, one that drained the life slowly. Her husband cared for her, her child wept at her side, and the villagers whispered in hushed voices outside her home. Some claimed they heard strange music on the nights she grew weaker, soft, distant bells echoing from nowhere. On her final day, she asked to be taken to her brother's grave. Too weak to walk, she was carried there. She rested her hand upon the earth and smiled for the first time in many years. "They are calling me," she whispered. "I can hear them now." And with that, she closed her eyes and was gone. The villagers buried her beside her brother, and for generations, her story was told and retold. Some swore the grass at the graves always grew greener than anywhere else in the village. Others said strange lights danced there at night. The legend of the Green Children spread far beyond Woolpit. Travelers came from distant lands to hear the tale of the children who had walked out of the earth, who had spoken in strange tongues, and who had lived between two worlds. To this day, no one truly knows where she came from, whether from a hidden underground land, another country, or some place beyond human understanding. But her story endures, because she herself endured. The girl who once stepped out of the shadows of a cave grew, loved, suffered, and died among the people of Woolpit. She was never fully theirs, but she was never fully lost either. She belonged to both worlds, and perhaps that is why her story has never faded. For some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be remembered.